Um, I thought I would start with just doing a quick intro, but that's challenging because honestly, man, the whole beauty of this phone call or this podcast is I don't know a ton about you, but I'll do my best. I'll just say that it's an honor, first off, to have your time. You taking time out to talk to me on this today. My intro is brief, like I said. I know that you're a performance expert at the Fittest, which is a nutritional supplementation company. I've been a customer and a fan of for probably over, I don't know, a year and a half now at this point. And I came to know you by receiving regular emails written by the Fittest. I assume written specifically by you. And I should say that I appreciate the content of those emails because they're not overtly salesy. They're actually rare in this day and age that they're educational, thought provoking, and I even dare to say maybe contrarian to mainstream writing. That's most of the things you read bombard us with these days. And the cherry on top, I feel, is that you always close it with an invitation to write you back, which is rare from companies these days and something I've taken you up on several times and have been really pleased that you respond quickly and thoughtfully. And it makes me curious about, how does one become a performance expert and what's your road to obtain that title and a little bit more about you.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate the intro there. It's been an interesting journey to this point. To address first the lack of salesy attitude. We have a philosophy and an ethos at the Fittest that we want to provide people value, and if we provide them value, they'll be customers, right? And so, as much educational content as we can provide, as much motivational, without being full of bullshit and sort of, I don't want to name any names of sort of motivational speakers, right? But ultimately, that's not our style, right? We're going to give it to you real. We're going to tell you can do it, but the road is not easy. And I do answer every email that comes in, every single one, period, without fail. I'm going to answer every email. Sometimes I get to them quickly, sometimes I don't. But we develop relationships with people. Our goal really is to make better people, specifically better men, but we've got a lot of women in the inbox as well. And we happen to sell supplements to help you get from here to there, and sort of that's our ethos. And we've done well with it. We've had a lot of fun in the process too. So, how did I get to be a performance expert? It's been an interesting road, to say the least. I don't know where you want me to start, but my background originally was I went to college at the University of Florida for biology, which, interestingly enough, I never used until I was 42. So, I had the aptitude. I feel like I'm a smart individual, but so stupid at the same time. I had to learn every lesson the hard way. You know, Interestingly enough, I'm a father, three beautiful children from 3 to 18. And my father instilled a lot of lessons in me that somehow I'm just picking up on some of them now, right? They didn't stick in the moment, so it's been an interesting road. So I had to learn the hard way a lot of lessons. So I was a smart guy, but a disaster of a human being for a long time. So I left college. I was a personal training director at a very big national gym chain that I won't name. That no longer exists, by the way. And I was doing very well, financially at least. But again, disaster. I didn't honor my blessings by any stretch of the imagination. I got into some things I shouldn't have gotten into, cheating on girlfriends, just doing dumb shit. And I carried that with me through a multitude of careers, probably until I met my wife. And even then, I didn't know what a man was by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't have a fucking clue. So anyway, I was a complete disaster. Again, just not honoring the blessings that were given me, right? And so I didn't treat my wife with respect, but I didn't know what that meant. I thought if I am a good provider and I make money, that life will be good. And I got pretty good at that. I got into the tech world after like sort of the gym world, and there was some martial arts instruction along the way as well, but ultimately landed in sort of the tech space, and made a lot of money. But when I was doing that, I was again still not behaving the way that I should, but I didn't know what that meant, right? I didn't know what I was supposed to do as a man other than provide, right? I didn't take my role as a protector, a presider, a father, a husband seriously, but not because I didn't want to, just because I didn't have any understanding of what that looked like. And when I found myself in a position where I was overweight, had a bunch of money, and it hit me. My wife actually said this to me. In sort of her trying to gently tell me that I was fucking up in life, was that, I'm not spending any time with my family. I'm providing material goods. And she asked me, hey, would you rather take your son to an NBA game in your Audi S5 convertible and sit in the box and be on your phone answering emails the whole evening because you're putting out dumb fires for your dumb job that makes all the money, or sit on the couch and watch that same game, eating with him, laughing with him, and taking the time to actually nurture your relationship? And that shit hit me fucking hard. And I sat on that for, I don't know, a few months, literally. And I didn't know what else to do, right? I didn't know how to get from there to here. And so for a period, I just sort of sat with it, and made some really, really monumentally difficult decisions, but fruitful decisions to make some changes. And it started first with my sort of setting an example from a physical standpoint. Getting back in shape. I knew how to get in shape. I've always been an athlete. I was a four-sport high school athlete. I've been competitive my whole life. I'm still competitive. But there was a lull there where I just didn't take care of myself. So I really jumped into taking care of myself physically. And then I set some boundaries with work where I was just going to check out at the end of every day, and anything can wait till tomorrow, right? Nothing is that important. And it cost me. It cost me a lot of money, probably. But I was learning how to be the man that I ought to have been years before. And then, so sort of cut to later, I was trying to transition out of that tech career and into something else, and find something that I had passion for. And along this journey, I got to sort of back up a little bit, I suppose. Along that journey, I was trying to understand what would make me sort of the healthiest, best athlete again, because that was a renewed pursuit, in some sense, and trying to set the example and be the example for my son and my other children, what health looks like. And I started immersing myself in a lot of reading. And through that process, I tried a lot of different things, right? I went vegan for 30 days. Now that's a crazy thing to do, as it turns out. So I wear a Whoop, and it tracks all sorts of health metrics, sleep metrics, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, effort, a lot across a lot of different spectrums, right? Stress. And what I found through a vegan diet was my heart rate variability tanked. My sleep scores were horse shit. Eczema that I never had, all of a sudden I had, right? My vision was fucking terrible. And returning to sort of a regular standard American diet cured those things immediately. But I'm like, that within 4 or 5 days, everything was back to normal. But I wasn't anywhere where I thought I should be. And so I sort of accidentally stumbled into the animal-based world and dove deep. And with my understanding in biology that I went to college for, it made a lot of sense. So I just jumped in with both feet and started thriving. I'm a competitive runner, and which you may know from my emails. And my times are better now than they've ever been. And I'm 44, and I'm setting to break some records that are 45 plus records coming up in the next year or so. So I take my athletic prowess seriously. Anyway, I jumped into that, and I was firing on all cylinders. My vision got better. Like, life was better. My body composition was changing dramatically. And so I sort of adopted this lifestyle. I said, I need to do something in this realm. Don't know what that is yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And I sort of sat quietly. I didn't talk to my wife about this. This was not a decision that we talked about. But I was going to transition out of the tech world into something that I cared about, that I was passionate about, that I believed in. And so I took, I don't know, 6 or 8 months and just sort of planned. And I'm big into planning. And I actually wrote a newsletter today about time management and how important planning is. Um, and so I sat down and I wrote out what my priorities are. I wrote out what I want, which had very little to do with the job, by the way. It had a lot more to do with being the husband that I ought to be, living out the faith that I have, being the best example that I could be as a father. Those are the priorities. You can fuck the career, right? But ultimately, if I could find a career that would align with those goals specifically, that's all the better, right? So ultimately, I jumped into pursuing the job at the Fittest, and I just told them I was their next. I don't recommend anybody do this, but I told them that I was their next copywriter. And I didn't pursue anything else. I was going to pursue that until the end of the road. If that didn't work out, I was going to do something else. But it worked, and the rest is history. I've been there since, and we've had a lot of fun, and we're helping people every day. I get emails in my inbox of somebody whose life is changed by this lifestyle. And now I work outside. You found me in my garage today, but typically I work outdoors. I hardly wear a shirt. And my kids are happy. My wife is thrilled that we're in this position. We make a fraction of the money we used to make, and we don't give a shit. We're enjoying this existence and being able to spread that understanding to the world with a huge platform now is really cool.
Man, you hit on so many there. I don't even know which one I want to pivot on first, but I think I'm going to start with the most recent one that sticks my memory, which is something really interesting that you said, which was you had a process when you got to the crossroads where you started kind of thinking through your priorities. You sat with maybe yourself in the quiet. You thought about where you had a vision for where you wanted to go, and you had some sort of process that you wrote down of how you got there. Where did you mentioned a while back that you learned you didn't always listen or learn from your dad. Where did you learn that process? Is that something that you learned through books or trial and error, or what did that come from?
It's a combination of sources, I suppose. My dad's always been a planner, and I really admire my father. He's a fantastic man to this day, and a fantastic athlete, by the way. But he's a list maker, right? And so I sort of adopted that philosophy. But there's three things that I do every single day without fail. Period. One is I write down my why, and I remind myself of my why every day. Right? My why is to be, the best example I can be for my children, and to do that, I have to be the best husband I can be to my wife. Because when you're, and not to get too philosophical, but when your children are young, especially, they learn a lot of things from their relationship that their parents have with one another. They learn conflict resolution. They learn what love looks like. They learn what a man is supposed to look like, what a woman is supposed to look like. So your son not only knows how to be, but what to look for. Your daughter knows how to be and what to look for, right? So I have to really nurture that relationship with my wife. So that's my why. Every day I write that down, without fail. I write it down when I start the day, and at the end of the day, I write it down again. The other thing is I write down what my long-term and short-term goals are. Um, Short-term goals could be today, right? Just what do I want to accomplish today? Whatever that is. Could be this week. It could be, and then my long-term goals. Where do I want to be in 5 years? And across the board, right? Get real specific. I'm not talking about just setting goals, but as they pertain to my why and how I'm going to get there, right? Step by step, what am I going to do to get there? And then the last thing I do is I write down all the things that happened to me that day that had meaning, right? Good or bad. And next to it, I write one thing only. That's my role in that. I can't change anything that anybody else does, but I can look at myself and I can look inward, I can reflect, and it's fucking painful sometimes. But when I do that, patterns emerge, right? If I'm seeing the same problems happening and my role is the same over and over again, then clearly there's something that I need to do differently in my life. And you can't unsee that. And so it's not necessarily an active behavioral change, but something that you're doing just doesn't feel as good next time because you've seen that pattern play out. So for me, that's the path that I take every single day. I don't miss a day, 7 days a week. And it's been monumentally helpful in not only like achieving things that I want to achieve and growing as a human and as a father and as a husband and as a friend, as an employee, but also it it helps me manage my time because I don't waste my time on shit that isn't fruitful toward those goals because there's only so much time in a day. I'm not scrolling through social media anymore. I don't give a shit about politics, who the president is. It does not affect how I'm going to live my life tomorrow, right? Because all of the bad things that have happened in my life are a result of my bad behavior. All of the good things that happen in my life are either by accident or maybe a result of my good behavior, right? So ultimately, for me, I have to do those things. It's uncompromising, right? There's no it's non-negotiable for me to do those things.
I'm reflecting a lot about what you talked about as a these processes and things that you're trying to teach your kids. I'm also a dad. I have a 7-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. And one of the things that you mentioned that I'm going to come back to that really resonates with me is I'm very similar to you in that one, I resisted authority very heavily as a kid. So whatever was being told to me as the rule or the principles or the advice, I had to do the hard knock. I had to learn it the hard way. And I often spend a lot of time reflecting how how I save my kids some of the same headaches, how I teach them, and how I talk to them, and how I share them wisdom that they can actually hear. I wonder, if I'm sure you've thought about the same thing then with your kids. Is it something that we can convey to them, or do they have to go through it the hard way? Is it the way we deliver the message? Is it just part of life that you have to kind of hit these roadblocks? What's your philosophy? How do you approach it? What have you learned? You've got an older child, so
Yeah, I think it's so multifactorial. There are some things that they have to learn the hard way, right? You don't want your kid to, you can't call out your kids. They're going to have to go through stuff. If you wanted to create I heard Alex Hormozy say this isn't me, but if you wanted to create a capable human being, right, a capable man, um, you wouldn't give them everything. You'd want them to go through trials and tribulations and overcome things. So, you know, my philosophy has been sort of I don't know how to put like a wedge, right? So when the kids are small, you're in this part of the wedge at the bottom where you protect them from everything, right? You shield them from all danger. Your toddler is falling. You don't want them to bang their head on the table. You don't want they you save their lives 10 times a day, right? My 3-year-old is the wildest human being that I've ever met, and so I'm constantly saving her from herself. As she gets older, right? The coddling slows, right? The wedge, the gap becomes wider. I'm going to let her skin her knee. Still not going to let her kill herself, but I'm going to let her skin her knee. I'm going to let her go through something to learn that lesson, as long as it's not too painful or irreparable, right? Um, and so, but with the goal that by the time that they reach sort of time to fly the coop, that they're capable, right? They're capable of living in the world. I don't think kids are capable of living in the world right now. I don't think public school teaches them how to live in the world. Parents don't do it. We have, unfortunately, we're in a situation where parents have to, a lot of times, parents in the household are working, or there's a lot of single parents. So kids don't get that valuable time with their parents and teaching them lessons. And every kid is different. Every kid learns differently, and that's something that I've had to understand. I'm a lot like my father. We're very similar interests. My son is not an athlete, right? As much as I tried to instill some things in him, he still works out. He lives with me, but he's not an athlete. It's not an interest. He doesn't want to play a sport. That's okay. I have to show interest in things that he's interested in, but he's sort of a sensitive kid. So if I come down on him, he's gonna straighten up right now, right? He's not a defiant kid. He's perfect. I don't have to discipline him. If I just say, hey, don't do that, he won't do it again. My daughters are like anti-authoritarian, like fuck you, dad, right? And so it's a totally different way of parenting. There's just a different it's a different animal. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I you know it's I think the philosophy is the same. You want the kids to be capable by the time your job is done, and maybe it's not ever done, but you want them to be capable. Um, and how they get there is different for every kid. That's my opinion anyway. So I don't think there's a one size fits all approach.
Well, I think another thing that you mentioned earlier that's applicable here, transferable, that I think about often too, is what you mentioned about when you tried going vegan. And one of the things I try to teach my kids without explicitly telling them to do this is, and I think all adults should also try to do more of, is self experimentation. Even things that might be contrarian or things that we think are silly or stupid, doing controlled experiments, and I think everyone, if you get specific into health and fitness, everybody these days seems to want the book or the answer or the right approach, and we're all physiologically different. And I think it's brave for people to say, I applaud you for saying something that's probably anti the message of your audience, but trying things, because you never know until you try. And I think I want my kids to, even if I say this works for me, maybe it doesn't work for you. So give it a shot. Do 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Take notes and take pieces of it. Maybe there's a part of something that works for you and other parts that don't. And I think that's so missed these days. Everybody wants to answer the shortcut. No one wants to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes and then adapt.
For sure, and that's true with I think everything, but it's specifically true in my world with like training philosophies, right? Um, you know, I run faster at a middle distance at 180 pounds or 185 than I ever did at 160, right? Because just from a biological, my biology, right? I'm only so capable from a cardio perspective, but I've got grit, right? So if I have more power to drive me through those that last kilometer, then all of a sudden I've got an edge up. Um, there are the world champions that are lungs on legs runners. Those guys have a gift that I don't have from a cardio perspective. And so the lighter, the better. But for me, I need more power to go faster and hopefully build the muscular endurance to go with the limited cardio capacity that I have. Now, I think I'm gifted in the cardio world compared to most people, but at the same time, I'm not that elite like endurance athlete cardio. So I have to adopt more power. The only way to do that is put on more muscle. So my training is going to be a lot different than maybe some of the people that I coach, right? If I'm writing a marathon plan for somebody, it's going to probably look different than what I do for myself.
Well, I like this shift because you and I are speaking a similar language. What I do in my community is I help men. I'm 46. I try to help men over 30, fathers. And I really like the sweet spot of people who haven't trained in years. I'm not looking to create athletes, but I want people to these dads that I see that are struggling for vitality of life, looking for energy, looking for passion for life, to build through movement, start a conversation about food and other longevity, whether it's getting in a sauna or whether it's getting in the sunshine, whether it's just taking walks. For me, getting them in a gym and just doing some movement, not crushing them, is a starting point. And it's one of the things that really attracts me to the information you put out there is it's not targeted towards specifically like a certain type of training or a certain lifestyle, but it's giving them kind of the building blocks of things to try to optimize their life. For my audience or general public, like what are those things that you're doing? You talked about specifically running training, but what are the things that you're doing to keep yourself, functioning for a long time? Things that you think are a general prescription for men over 30, and how do you incorporate it? And how do they get started?
Yeah. So I first of all, I love that you said that, it's guys getting started. I get actually a lot more. It fills my cup when I get somebody that's in the inbox and I'm talking to and I'm coaching them through whatever it is that they're going through. If they've never done anything and they get off the couch and all of a sudden they're hitting milestones where they're no longer on diabetes medications, to me that means more than the guy that I'm coaching who is, a D1 college athlete. That's his gains are now so incrementally small because he's such a seasoned and finely tuned athlete. For whatever reason, I just get more fulfillment out of the life changing. I'm not on a diabetes medication anymore. That means a lot to me, and so I love that. As far as things that I think that are sort of non-negotiable as you get older, especially, you're really paying attention to recovery, right? And recovery is really, I mean, sleep is of ultimate importance, right? It's where the vast majority of your growth hormone production happens, right? During the first 90 minutes of slow wave sleep. So you've got to be super consistent, right? You've got to Make sure that you're getting to bed at the same time every day. Don't eat late. Don't drink alcohol. If you're going to do it, at least do it early enough in the day where you're not affecting your sleep and your growth hormone production, because that's where all the healing happens, both for your body and your mind, right? So that's paramount, and it's
Can we pause on that one? Do you get emails? I'm curious what feedback you get, because I hear that too, and I'm with you. You don't need to convince me. I'm fully subscribed to this, but I'm always curious where people are stumbling on this. Like, what is the excuse? What is the block? What do you think is keeping most people from just stopping the bullshit, turning off the scroll, turning off the TV, and just going to bed? It doesn't have to even be some fancy technology or looking at the Whoop in the morning, but just go to fucking sleep.
yeah, I think we live in this crazy digital world where there are devices that are made to be addictive, right? The social media, people feel like that if they're not up on the latest whatever it is, whether it's the latest political debate or whether it's the war in Israel or the war in Ukraine, they've got to have an opinion. If they don't have the right opinion, and their friends ostracize them, and they get caught up in shit that really, um, in the immediate, doesn't affect them if they're not a healthy, productive father and husband, you know, man in general, then they can't have any impact on that anyway, right? To me, the best thing that I can do as a regular guy, right? I'm not a congressman. I don't have influence over the world. I have maybe some influence over my audience, but beyond that, the best thing that I can do is raise my kids to be the best human beings imaginable, right? All of the debates out there that are happening. If I raise good quality kids and other men are out doing the same thing, sort of all that stuff takes care of itself, right? Um, it doesn't matter what anybody's philosophy is on like abortion, for example, and not to get all super controversial, but whether you believe in it or don't believe in it, it probably goes away if you have upwardly mobile, successful people that are getting married before they're going off and trying to have sex or whatever, right? If I raise my kids to be quality human beings and everybody else is doing the same, we're not having a debate because nobody's getting a fucking abortion in the first place, right? So I think the best thing that I can do, right, is to be the best husband and father imaginable. And if it's not in the pursuit of that goal, it doesn't exist to me. So scrolling through social media is not something that I'm going to waste time on, right? Personally. But to get somebody to stop doing that, it's a mindset shift, right? And that's where it goes back to, what is your why, right? Um, and if that why is to be the best man and father, that stuff is not serving you. Anything that doesn't serve you's got to go. Period. Right. And so when it comes to sleep, to me, that we say it's the first lifestyle tenet, or the first ancestral tenet, for a reason. It might be the most important because it makes everything else you do easier, right? If you're sleeping well, you're not craving the caffeine in the morning first thing. If you're sleeping well, you're not likely reaching for the carbohydrates in the morning because your body's not craving that. If you're sleeping well, your workouts are better. If you're sleeping well, you're firing on all cylinders mentally throughout the day. You're not getting those afternoon crashes. There's so many things that are affected by your sleep. So when you prioritize that sleep, and it has very little to do with what you do when you're in bed. It has everything to do with what you do leading up to that point, right? Sunlight, making sure that you stressed your body and taxed your body enough so that you're tired. There's a multitude of things that happen before that, but if you prioritize that, you're way ahead of the game to start with. Everything else is easier.
Yeah, I hear all that. I think for me, it feels like movement is the easiest prescription. People kind of get on board with that. They've heard a million times to exercise and to crush themselves, and so get them into a gym, and moving feels very easy. And that's where I start subtly um, blasting them with subliminal messages about sunlight and sleep and water and turning off the blue light and those things. But probably like you, I think what I'm taking away from it is all we can do is live those values, demonstrate them, show the life that we're living, and the rewards that we receive by doing it, and try to keep sharing that message. Because I sometimes feel like, as I'm sharing it with my audience, it almost feels like you're the crazy person, because nowhere else is mainstream media or typical health and news organizations talking predominantly about sleep without some sort of medication, or getting out in the sun without sunscreen, or taking just a long walk and not crushing yourself. And as I share those things, sometimes people say, "Well, you look very healthy. You seem very healthy," but it doesn't seem to it doesn't seem to resonate. They don't pick it up. And I guess that's all I can do is put that message out, and somebody who wants to receive it receives it. Is that what you found?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a pretty big platform to share those things, but the cool thing is that I think it's growing, right? People are understanding, and there's a lot of things that have happened. Um, you know, Again, controversial topics, right? The COVID vaccine, for example, right? We know now that obesity was the biggest driver of deaths, right? And that's the big metabolic unhealth is the biggest driver of death in the world. Anyway, 9 out of the top 10 causes of death can be attributed to metabolic unhealth and obesity. So COVID was just another example of that. But they told us at first that if you get the vaccine, then you can't transmit it, you can't get it. Then they said, well, if you get it, yeah, you can get COVID, but it's mild and it's no big deal, and you still can't transmit it. Well, you can get it and you can't transmit it, but you're not going to go to the hospital. Well, you can go to the hospital, but you're not going to die, right? Well, it only lasts for so long, and now you got to get a booster. And so they lie to you over and over and over again, right? And to what end? Why? Maybe follow the money. I don't want to get too deep into like conspiracy theories and all that stuff, but at the same time, I think people are not people aren't stupid, right? And they're lied to enough. They start looking for somebody who's telling them the truth, right? And so they find the Paul Saladinos of the world, the Liver Kings. They find even Joe Rogan now, right? Andrew Huberman. There's a lot of people that, Peter Attia. There's a lot of people like living in this space that have a lot of credibility, right? And who bring, science to the table and say, this is, look at it for what it's worth. Why, if cholesterol is 95% of our hormones by weight, it's 80% of your brain, right? Arguably maybe more. It's in every single cell in your body. It's critical to hormone balance and production. It's critical to making vitamin D and synthesizing vitamin D. It's critical to regulating your immune system. Why all of a sudden is that killing us when it never did? Right? So let's figure that out, and let's talk about it, and let's actually figure out what's going on. Then Anthony Chaffee just publishes a study yesterday, 70,000 people over 80 that lived to be centenarians all had skyrocketed LDL, crazy LDL, right? Well, why is that? Maybe it's protective. Maybe that when 70% of people that go to the hospital for a cardiac event have normal cholesterol, but 80% of them are metabolically unhealthy in some other way, whether it's diabetes, whether it's just a regular obesity, prediabetes, whatever that is, then maybe it's not the cholesterol. Maybe that just happens to be high, right? Because most of them, majority of them have normal cholesterol. So what do? They lower what normal cholesterol is to make it look like people have higher cholesterol because they want to sell you something, a statin, whatever it is. So it's just more of us living out the example, right? And performing a certain way and cognitively functioning, right? And being happy. What do? Right? People will ask you what you do, right? How do you live your life? Why is this working for you? And then you just give them a basic understanding. And you can't do it all at once. It's got to be incremental. You said movement is the catalyst for you to get people to do other things. For me, it's maybe a few different things, but I can't say come out and live in the woods with me and get cold with me every day and eat liver and change everything about you all at once. They're not going to do it. It's overwhelming. Put the phone down, put the blue light down, stop eating 3 hours before bed, and see if you don't feel better when you wake up in the morning. Now you're going to be better tomorrow, right? That's one thing we can do, right? And then we can start talking about the diet.
Is that your order of operations? Is that your order of operations? Is that where you think the predominant first mover is to start those habit building?
Yeah, personally, yes. I think it's an easy thing to do. It doesn't require it costs nothing, right? So the barrier to entry is zero. It's just stop looking at the phone, do some breathing exercises, stop eating late. Just eat earlier in the day, right? Little things that you can do, and all of a sudden now tomorrow you've got more motivation, and then we can talk about the other things. We can talk about how much better your workout's going to be, and now you can go harder, and now you're getting a big bolus of testosterone because you're sprinting faster or you're lifting heavier, right? And then your body's going to be craving the right things. How do I build muscle with this movement that I'm doing? Well, now let's talk about the food, right? So if we're incremental with these things, and I think sleep, eat, and move are probably the three most important things we can do. All the other things are nominal comparatively, right? Getting cold is really important for me at my age and the level of activity I have, but it's not going to help everybody near as much as sleep, eat, move, right? And arguably probably bond. I think bonding is an underrated tenet, because everything wraps back to relationships, right? Because why are you doing these things in the first place? For the people you love, right? So to me, I think bonding is the why that you do these other three things.
I want to shift gears for a little bit on something that you said. You touched a point that's definitely sensitive to me. The last 3 years around COVID, and when I finish this, I don't think there's a question in it. More just more of an open-ended statement, just to get your reaction and your thoughts, because I don't think there is an answer. Else we would all be doing something. You mentioned the LDL and the cholesterol, and that's definitely a hot point. You and I, and probably our community, are very similar podcasts and authorities that we listen to and that we trust, and we've found signal with. I think one of the most disappointing things for me in the last 3 years is the information that's come out is, I've garnered even less trust for the trusted authorities on health and wellness. Um, and so when you and I talk about things like these LDL studies, for us, it feels very easy to wrap our head around and to believe and to take action. I still find a lot of people are so ingrained in the science that's been based in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's still so strong. Those marketing campaigns were so powerful, and that was so authoritative that anything that comes out now, people feel like it's fringe or not conclusive. It doesn't have the Lindy effect or the time tested for people to believe it. But my sadness is we've just seen 3 years of a total degradation of information, science rigor, and trust. And so I'm just disappointed in other people at this point not being more willing to question, look at opposing views, or question what they thought has always been true. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in the backs of minds, people are starting to question or look. But still, when I talk about a predominantly red meat diet or all eggs, people still look at me like I'm about to keel over and die, even though they see my performance, they see how I appear in front of them, my energy, but they're still concerned that I'm on the fringe of death. So again, there's no question there, but I'm curious. I'm curious what it's going to take for us to open up more people and get more questioning, or to move this movement forward.
Yeah, part of me is discouraged, but part of me is actually quite encouraged. When you look at the COVID vaccine, for example, like my family, we didn't get vaccinated. My youngest has never been vaccinated for anything, by the way. And we just decided that the risk reward ratio skews heavily in favor of risk, right? So we decided not to do it. So when it comes to like the COVID vaccine, for example, we know they lied, right? If they contradict themselves 15 times, they can only be right at least, but they can only be right once if they're right at all, right? And as it turns out, they're probably not right. So I think people that bent, I knew a lot of people that I was disappointed in because they said, I'm never going to get this thing. And then when push came to shove and they couldn't go to the grocery store, they couldn't do whatever, they decided to get it. And they had buyer's remorse. I've got a family member who falls into that category, and he got sick in the aftermath. And lives in a very authoritarian state. So he sort of felt like he had to do it, be able to support the family, and he did it. And he wishes he didn't. Those people are now jaded. They're not going to do it again, right? So I think that and then it causes them to question the rest of it, right? If they lie to us 10 times, they're going to lie to us 11. So they're looking for information. And because there are some mainstream characters out there, the Joe Rogans of the world, who are pretty philosophically aligned with those of us in the carnivore, like animal based community. Um, there's bigger voices, and he's bringing people on that are in that community. He's had Paul Saladino on. He's had Andrew Huberman on quite a few times, and so there's and people in the hunting space, and so Cameron Hanes. There's a lot of people that he's brought on, especially recently. That sort of um, that's a huge audience, right? And so that audience then gets them to look up Cameron Hanes. Let's talk to him, or look up Andrew Huberman. And there's a lot of philosophical alignment between those guys and us. And eventually, maybe they find us. And then I can, use my platform, and the rest of our community can use the platform to educate people. And when they see the studies, and when they follow Ansel Keys, and they realize that, cholesterol was a big, funny scam where, they did this 8 country study, but they actually investigated, I think it was 21 countries, right? So he left out the majority because they didn't align with his original theory. And then when you look at, that play out, and the fact that red meat, yes, it's high in cholesterol, that's a good thing, right? Because it's responsible for all of these hormonal processes and immune responses. Then we can have a conversation about how much should we have? Is dietary cholesterol, affecting our blood cholesterol levels at all anyway? And if it does that matter, right? So there's questions, right? And then we can start to figure out what the answers to those questions are. And red meat has a lot of things that you can't find in plants. There's not a plant in the world that has creatine, carnitine, carnosine, choline, DHA, K2, D3, heme iron. These things are critical, not necessarily to live, but for optimal performance and hormone balance and longevity. Absolutely, they're critical, both body and brain performance. So when you look at what's happening in the world, I think it's great that they're lying to us. I think it's great that people are lining up to take Ozempic, and then they're, unfortunately, some people are going to suffer the consequences, but they're realizing that it's anorexia in a shot, right? And there's all sorts of horrible side effects, and maybe that's not the answer. So what is the answer, right? And then they Google it, and I've written an article about that, and so maybe they found me, right? And we can have a conversation, and I can hopefully do what I can, not as an authority on any subject, but as a guy who's also asking questions and trying to answer those questions. We can learn together, and we can move forward and improve, right? And I think that's all we can do. People. It's funny. I get emails all the time. Thank you for all this information. Really, I share what I learned yesterday with you today. I learned it a day before you did, right? A lot of times, right? The things that I talk about as far as being an effective man, I learned these things the hard way, and I'm trying to share it with you so maybe you can, learn it a little easier than I did, because I almost lost my family over some of these things that I did that were stupid, right? So I'm not some wise sage. I'm just a guy who asked a lot of questions and made a lot of mistakes, and tries to share those things with people, to hopefully give them a softer landing and guide them in the right direction. And so far, it's proven fruitful.
Dude, that's amazing. I resonate highly with that. I think without even connecting those dots until you just said it, maybe it's why my energy resonated with yours. Is I'm on a similar mission. I'm learning, and maybe you made a strong point to me, which is maybe the power isn't in these mainstream pieces, but it's people like you, it's people like me, and it's our communities that are sharing what we're learning on the streets with other people just like us. And over time, we may not have the 3 letter credentials next to our names. We may not have high power Ivy League schools at our disposal, but we have authenticity, and we're bringing real knowledge that we're demonstrating day by day. And I think people feel that, and they see that, and they find that. And I think that's why I found you guys. I'm very appreciative of the message you're putting out and you're sharing. I'm learning from you. I'm trying to share that same message with my audience, not to steal thunder from you, but to amplify the message you're putting out, because I think I believe in the rising tides lift all boats, and we need more.
For sure. More voices is always better, right? So I love that you're doing that. Steal all my thunder. I love that. I think that's great. It's It's what we can do.
But I'm sure when I purchased on your website, I got on the email list, and continue to get the emails. I don't know if you send it out weekly or bi-weekly, but I look forward to them every time I open. You're one of the few that when it shows up, I'm opening it right away. I'm reading, I'm digesting, and I'm learning.
Yeah, I do pay attention to metrics. I ask a lot of questions. I want people to know. I want to know what people want to know about, right? I want to see what people are curious about and try to help them understand things that they're just curious about. So I do ask those questions every once in a while. What do you want to know about? What do you want to learn about? And because we ask those questions, we actually have, crazy enough, because I just metrics matter in writing. I have like 3 times the open rate as industry standard. So people are opening and reading our emails and they're responding. I get a shitload of emails back, right? And I love that. I love that people are interacting with us and becoming part of the community, because my reach is finite. I mean, it grows, but I don't know what the reach of our audience is, right? Beyond me, right? And they're sharing with people. And I people emailing me all the time. Hey, I share your newsletter 3 days a week with 10 guys in my church group. I give them a language warning, but I tell them, look, these are young guys that just are not worldly, and they're floundering, and like a lot of young people are in today's society, right? And so, it's things that I can only share my own perspective, and I try to share other people's perspective when I can with testimonials and that kind of thing. But if I can help somebody, that's just fucking cool. I love what I do. I enjoy doing this every day, 7 days a week. And sometimes it is 7.
Well, you've opened up something else now that I'm curious in, which is, as I'm thinking about, I'm just starting and trying to build content and trying to think about what I want to share. What's your process? Are you? It sounds like you're almost day to day. You're taking what you're thinking about and then you're kind of translating that into a writing, or are you like on a board mapping out this month I want to talk about these subjects? What's your process look like?
Both. So I definitely have lanes that I try to fill and work within. Um, Probably 2 days a week. I do that and I map out. I know what I'm going to write about next week, and maybe I've got some of it written. But there's also things that just pop up. If the radio is on or the television is on by some crazy chance, and there's news, right, and I see some absurd thing on the news, right? Which is like, for example, you know, uh, segments about health and fitness, or Good Morning America, or one of these shows, right? These morning shows, Today's Show. They've always done these like health segments, and maybe they were misguided. Maybe they wanted to help you lower your cholesterol, but they were about trying to things that you could do in your life from a lifestyle perspective to improve your life from a health and fitness perspective. Now, these are just drug commercials masquerading as a health and fitness segment. If you take Ozempic, you're going to lose X amount of weight. They don't tell you that if you're less than 50% body fat, you actually get fatter as a percentage of your body, right? Because you're losing 50% lean tissue and 50% body fat. Well, so if you didn't start at 51% or more, you got fatter and less healthy, and your bones are deteriorating, and you got all sorts of malnourishment happening, and gastric emptying slowed that point is horrible for you. But they don't care. It's just an infomercial for their funders, right? So I'll write about that, and I'll write about that today for tomorrow's newsletter, because that's poignant to me. That matters to me, and maybe it's something I've written about in the past, and I can point to that blog article. So it's both. There's a lot of planning. And some articles take a lot of research. Like I just did an article on transmethenic acid, and its important role in fighting cancer. That took me a month to put together. I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything, that I told the truth, and there was not one thing that could be erroneous or false. So I went down a lot of rabbit holes to understand, to make sure that everything that I had read, or put together in the blog article was correct. Because I want to make sure that I'm impeccable with my work. I don't want to be the guy who takes some study and just runs with it. Because then I lose my credibility, and then people aren't going to listen to me, and I'm not helping as many people. So that matters, right? So some pieces take a lot longer. Sort of the pieces about life experiences I put together pretty quickly. Pieces about that are deeply scientific, they take longer.
What are you mentioned people are writing in, you've been kind of asking what they want to hear about. I'm always curious the pulse. We're going into a very marketing part of the year, which is the begin the end of a year and the beginning of another one. And I'm curious, what are people wanting to know about? What's hot, on people's minds? Is there something to kind of pull to the top that you're seeing?
The thing that I get most often, and we send out a series when you purchase from us. You get a series of notes from Michael, our CEO. It's two things, right? Your order is on its way. Here's my story. While you're waiting on your order, just here's a little bit about me, and tell us why you purchased. And people are always coming in and telling us that their biggest struggles are consistency or discipline. Finding the time to do something. I addressed that today. And or they say I have trouble being consistent and getting to the gym every day. That's discipline, right? So discipline is a big issue. Um, I think time management is a problem. These are things that are sort of interestingly enough, they don't necessarily fall into the scope of health and fitness, but you can't get there without a proper plan, right? So I feel like it's poignant. I feel like it's something that I should help people with because I'm pretty good at it. So it doesn't always circle back to the ancestral tenets. It doesn't always circle back to diet or sleep. A lot of those things are symptoms of shitty discipline or lack of knowledge, right? If I'm not doing it, it's because I don't have the discipline to do it, or I don't know how to start. So a lot of it is just, it's not rocket science. It's like, how can I help you be accountable to yourself? Then we can fill in the blanks. Then we can talk about if you can be accountable to yourself. Now we can talk about the tasks, the eating, the working out, the sleeping, the whatever those things are, putting the fucking phone down. Those are things that we can talk about after we've instilled sort of disciplinary philosophy. So it's a lot of, I don't know, like counseling in some sense, right?
Totally. You actually had me thinking. I'm curious if in the same circles, if you've read this book, it probably was one that changed my life maybe 10 years ago when I started getting into health and wellness and training. It was Mindset by Carol Dweck, this idea of a fixed mindset versus a fixed and a growth mindset. Are you familiar with that book?
I haven't heard that one. No.
Well, if you shoot me your address later, I'll send you a copy. I share it with anyone who comes into my gym because it changed my life. This idea that yeah, you can really change anything, but behavior change really is, I think, a superpower, and not many people have it, but I do believe it can be cultivated. But to your point, I think that's where people I see struggle the most is they just don't know how to start changing an ingrained pattern. And if you can start grinding away at those patterns and start changing that groove, the trajectory can go from here. Coming out of the camera, you can change your trajectory over time by just slightly altering your path. Last thing for you, because we're coming up on an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. You've given me a lot of nuggets and a lot of things to chew on, which is we'll keep it fun. You train. Pandemic 2.0 comes along. There's a new rule. You can only have 4 movements in the gym. I don't know why. We're gonna throw this out at you. It'd just be easy for me to say, what are your 4 favorite movements? What if you could only do 4 things? What are you doing in the gym?
If I could do four things for fitness exclusively, I think deadlifts number one, sprinting number two, farmer's carry number three, and four. Gotta throw something. I probably just push-ups, man, because you can do those fucking.
What about what style of deadlift? Are you conventional? Are you trap bar? How are you doing your deadlifts?
No, conventional deadlifts. I think you're cheating a little bit with the trap bar. Your range of motion is different. Your angles are different. I like a traditional deadlift. Lift fucking head, right? Deadlift is a full body exercise. It creates a bolus of testosterone, right? And same thing with sprinting, by the way. The crazy statistic. I think it's like, it's over 90% of humans over 40 never sprint again.
Yeah, well, it's been you're pushing me because I'm 46 and it's been a minute. I'll take you up and I'll get out there.
Yeah, you can sprint anywhere, whether it's cold or not. Just warm up. it's critical to me, right, as a runner, I was disappointed. I ran a race for the first time in a long time last week, and I lost to a track star from UNC Wilmington, and a second place sucks because if you ain't first, you're last. So I got to get back to the drawing board and do a little more work. But for a 44-year-old guy, I'll take it, but it's not good enough.
Greg, an hour spending time with you. I learned a lot. I now know a little bit more about what a performance expert is, and I see it in you. I speak for your audience as well as myself that we say thank you for the work that you do, the information that you share, and your ability to spark this movement beyond your own audience, and that people are sharing that. And I think we need more of it. So keep it up, and I thank you for your time. I'm humbled today.
But likewise, like I said, I'm no sage. I'm just a guy who gets to share the lessons he learns with a big audience. Any of us could do that. So it's pretty cool. If you keep writing, you keep reading, I'll keep writing.
You got it. That's a deal. All right, brother. Be well. Thank you.